Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our summer child safety talk. I hope you really find it helpful, and it's designed to give you tools to be able to have conversations with your children about child safety and to be able to supervise them when you're not around to supervise them. Think of it like portable safety. What can you do to help keep your kids safe during the summer? And, this is more than 10 years now that we've been doing classes like this. And I think it's wonderful that there are far more classes like this. I really encourage you to get as much education as you can because it really does work. That's the great news. The great news is that child safety education works, and you really should feel empowered to be able to give your kids these safety messages before they go off to camp, while you're in a bungalow colony, while your kids are at sleepovers, at other friends, in the generally more loose or less restricted environment of the summer. Let me start with a very encouraging story, something that was very meaningful to my wife and I. About 10 years ago, after we did a teleconference, before the Facebook Live thing, we did a teleconference before the summer, speaking about topics like this. And my wife and I were driving out west. We were on vacation, and we got a phone call from a Hasidic woman who lived in Canada, and she called us to thank me for the call, for the teleconference, and to thank me for what it did. Really saved her child's life. And what happened was, after the teleconference, she sat down, she felt empowered. She had the conversation with her son about keeping safe during the summer. And one day the son had a substitute Rebbe who was teaching Judaic studies, Limudei Kodesh, to the class. And he started to get very inappropriate with this boy. The boy started yelling, as his mother had told him to do. He ran to the office and said in Yiddish, I need to call my mother. And the office personnel said, I'm sorry, you can't call now, it's just not the time for it. And he started yelling at the top of his lungs in Yiddish, which I recommended that they do when I tell you to tell your kids. He started yelling at the top of his lung in Yiddish, somebody touched me in a private space. I need to call my mother right now. And you could imagine, lickety split, they were on the phone, called the mother, and he was saved because she had spoken to him. It so happens, again, it was 10 years ago, that particular camp did not do child safety training like many camps didn't at the time. Thankfully, the environment is different now. But this stuff really does work. And again, I want to encourage you and empower you not to send your children off to summer camp frightened and terrified. Research clearly shows that when you terrify kids, it doesn't work. It frightens them. It gets them unsettled. It gets you unsettled. So it's about finding balance. You cannot keep your children at home forever. They need to go out. They need to grow and explore. Of course, you do whatever you can to keep them safe. But again, it's not going to work to try to keep them locked up, so to speak, which we would all love to do as parents, to keep our kids where they would be safe at all times. So that's the first message. Educate them, empower them, and empower yourself to be able to do this education. One of my friends, true story, about 5-6 years ago, the first day of the summer, a good friend of mine who runs and owns a summer camp called me up and he said, okay, Yankee, knock it off already. He said, we got the message. The message being about child safety. He said, my 12-year-old, the bunk full of 12-year-old kids, the bus pulled up to camp, and the kids came off the bus, and the counselor of the children went out to give Shalom Lechem, to shake the hands of the boys coming in, and the boy said, my mother said I shouldn't touch you. He says, okay, Yankee, we got it. Stop it. It's going overboard. I don't think it's going overboard. But balance is good and education is healthy. The great news is that many or most camps are really doing good, solid, educationally sound training already. And that's that's the first step, I believe, to take as parents of children going away to summer camp, is call up the camp and ask them, what training do you give your counselors in terms of child safety education? What are they told about boundaries? Do you have an in-service, a pre-service actually, before the summer starts to speak to the staff about it? Or what guidelines are there? What do you, a nice way to do this, again, that conversation perhaps should have taken place before you signed your child up, so it might not be the best way to start this, but a really positive way, here's what I would suggest, a really positive way to have this conversation is to call up and say, look, camp starts next week. I'm going to be sitting down and having a safety talk with my child before the summer. I just want to be sure that we're in sync. What do you tell the kids? And what are children told in terms of their comfort level in camp? Now, a good camp should have policies in place besides for telling the staff what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Are you allowed to put your arm around the child? Should you be alone with the child? Obviously not. But these boundaries, so to speak, the first part about it is the boundaries that the staff should have with the children. Now, as far as the children are concerned, what should a child do if they feel uncomfortable? And I really believe that every single camp should have, during orientation, the very first day of the summer, tell the kids that if you ever feel uncomfortable, there should be designated people in the camp that they're able to talk to. Preferably at least one should be outside of the top leadership of the camp. So, camps set this up in different ways, but again, a nice, comfortable way to have this discussion with the camp personnel is to say, what are you going to be telling the children during orientation? I want to make sure that we're on the same page so that I can have that conversation with my child. And if the camp director says, oh, thank God, we never have problems like that, run for the hills. That's really a bad sign. And a camp director should be able to tell you, yes, we do have policies in place, we did train our staff, and here is what the children should be told. And I'm very glad you called, because we want all the children to have this message. So that's basically it. Do not terrify them. It doesn't help. Empower them, as I said before, and educate them. The general safety talk, we have a 9-minute video that we made. If you do just a Google search, it's free. Google search Yakov Horowitz Child Safety Education. It's 9 minutes and 40 seconds. You'll find it right away on YouTube. Listen to it if you want to go through the details of child safety education, what to speak to your children about, how to speak to them, and what research shows to be effective. There are other very wonderful organizations that have free resources available. Amudim, you can go to amudim.org. They have excellent resources for parents and a fantastic program for education that's also free for camp personnel. If you're running let's say a summer camp a day camp in your bungalow colony, or any other place like that, if you're running a summer camp and you have not trained your staff, or you're thinking about planning training for your staff, I really encourage you to take advantage of it. I was honored to write them a letter of recommendation. I viewed the material before it went to press, and it's really excellent. Debbie Fox is giving a safety webinar. You can Google that online. If I'm not mistaken, it's June 21st. So avail yourself of these resources that were not there just a few years ago. I really encourage you to do that. Let me talk to you about bungalow colonies. And I think it's important to have, again, a set of boundaries for kids going to sleepovers, for young ladies who are, for the first time perhaps, being day camp counselors, going to babysit at night. I said I wouldn't frighten you, so I'm not going to tell you about situations that come up regularly when young ladies, this naive kids, are sent into situations where they're supervising children, or especially when they're babysitting at night. So, you need to set rules in place so that your child is in a safe environment, and give them an out if they're not feeling safe, a way to call you, to contact you, to yell. Empower them and talk to them about it. It's something that might fly over your radar. one thing that we notice, that I've noticed many times, is that when people are in a safe environment, so to speak, they tend to let their guard down. I did a safety talk in a beautiful, wonderful community in Eretz Yisrael in Israel, that's in Yehuda v'Shamron in the West Bank, and they have a security fence. They live in a rough neighborhood, and when we drove into that security fence and the gate closed behind us, everybody, was a little bit more relaxed, myself included, or maybe especially myself. And what happens when you close that gate and you feel comfortable, it's wonderful. The problem is that sometimes you let your guard down about dangers that take place inside. And we see this culturally also when we have a close-knit community. We also tend to feel that way. Outside is dangerous, inside is safe. So when you're in your bungalow colony and the gate is closed, just remember that those boundaries need to be supported and encouraged. Again, we printed, it's in the previous Facebook post that I posted just recently. We have a free summer safety poster. I really encourage all of you to print it, post it in your summer day camp, post it in your summer shul. It just really the basic rules of child safety. But having that poster out creates a dialogue and creates a discussion so that people talk about it. That's what keeps kids safe, when there's a general awareness about child safety. When it's talked about, it helps. One more thing, I want to talk to you about supervising teenagers, and then I'm just going to talk to you about the fun stuff about the summer. Please see to it that your teenagers are supervised during the summer. Now, obviously, supervision for a 17-year-old is different than supervision for an 8-year-old. But be aware of where they're going to. Make sure they have healthy outlets. Please, make sure they have healthy outlets. We can ban places and things till the cows come home. But if we don't create healthy alternatives, we're really wasting our time. The kids are going to get into trouble. If you say, this place is not okay, and that place is not okay, and that place is not okay, but you don't give them something to do, there are going to be problems. I'm going to post on my Facebook page, I'm going to post a few pieces. One of them was an article that I wrote about 10 years ago during the summer. It's 1 a.m., do you know where your kids are? And it went through discussing a very wild scene that took place in a Monticello establishment during the summer, and what happened was that many of the folks in positions of authority banned certain places, so the kids just found a different place where nobody was. Thankfully, a lot of people got involved and started to create kosher, healthy alternatives. Please see to it that you have fun. Start baseball and basketball leagues and swimming contests, whatever you could do to gainfully occupy the children. Please see to it that you do. And finally, on a very light note, please, those of you who have young children or teenagers, please spend time with your kids. I'm going to post another piece I wrote called Time Not Money. We all think as parents, especially if you're not able to take your kids on these fancy vacations, the kids, it's nice for them to go to expensive places and all that. They really want you. Use the summer to really spend time with your kids, to build memories for them, to establish a real deep, meaningful relationship. I'm going to close with a story that I saw that made such a powerful impact on my life, and probably one of the top 5-10 impacts that took place for my life on my parenting and my own family. Our next door neighbors here in Monsey were a wonderful family named the Frankenthals. Elchanan and Annette became extraordinarily close. And the very first Shabbos that we moved to Monsey 30 years ago, many of the neighbors sent over gifts or food for Shabbos, and my wife and I went around to say thank you. to these folks afterwards. My wife was very good. She told me exactly, whose name belonged to what. And we went to our next door neighbors, the Frankenthals, and they have 4 boys. And Elchanan Frankenthal, the father, was in the cheese business. He had a plant in Green Bay, Wisconsin. That was his life. When the youngest kid went off to college, they moved to Chicago, where they live now. We're still in touch. And he wanted to be closer to work, but this was his life. He had a car service waiting for him 5 a.m. Monday morning. He went off to work, and he came back either very late Thursday night during the winter and Friday afternoon during the summer. That was his life. But he was determined to have a meaningful relationship with his kids. And I'll tell you what I saw. So when my wife and I went into the house to say Good Shabbos and thank you, Annette, the mother, was sitting at the table with a few of the kids. And I said, "Hi, where's your husband? I just want to say hello." So she said, the kids all said, "Well, he's in the study." So I said, I'm a little impulsive. I said, "Hey, where's the study?" And I started to walk there, and as if I just pressed I got an electric, like I pressed a live wire, all of them said, no. Nope. Like it was obviously a culture of the home. And what this man did was, every Friday night on a rotating basis, he secluded himself in his study after the Friday night meal with one of his sons on a rotating basis. And they would bring board games and maybe some Torah learning and, some nash. And they spent 3-4 hours together, door closed, one-on-one time, no cell phones. They weren't even around then. And it made such an impression on me. I'll just never forget it for the rest of my life. And I remember walking out the door with my wife, and I said, "My God, I live locally. Do I spend 4 hours a month with each of my children? I mean, real time, real quality time." And it was like a punch in the gut to me. Here's a guy who didn't have the opportunity of being home every night with his kids. That was his life. But he was determined and thought about what he could do to keep a relationship with his kids. And I actually taught myself, I wrote in the article in Mishpacha magazine, I taught myself to golf and to ski and started taking my kids on a rotating basis every Thursday night during the golf season and skiing with them, just to be able to see to it that I found venues to make this kind of time. And our grandchildren live in different cities. We're actually going, with God's help, on a second RV grandchildren trip. We're renting a recreation, in Winnebago, and going away with the grandkids for a few days. Do what you got to do, folks. However, if you're lucky enough to have, to work near home and have your children and grandchildren near you, figure that out. And if that's not your life, you figure that out too. Because, ultimately at the end of the day, it is just the most important thing that you, on so many levels, that you have this relationship with your kids. So make it work and find the quiet time during the summer. We're so busy, we're so plugged in, we're so overwhelmed very often with life. Summertime is a great time to go for a walk. Teach your children to appreciate nature. It's such a gift that you give your children. I always say that when you teach your children to love nature, you're giving them a friend that when they grow older and have pressures of life, that they're able to go and unwind there. There's so many beautiful things that you can do during the summer. So again, feel empowered, speak to your kids about child safety, interact with the camp to find out what they're doing, keep a set of protocol with your children in bungalow colonies. Make sure that there's a discussion about safety. There should be a discussion among the parents about where the boys are going, where the girls are going, what's going on with babysitting, who's supervising. All of this lends to a fantastic, enjoyable, and safe summer. I hope you found this helpful, and best wishes for a really fantastic summer. Be well.